Everyone get out!
Greetings landlubbers, welcome to Naval Action. This is a game I've been eyeballing for a while, and even though it is basically a playable alpha, it is pretty fun for what you can play right now. I mean, it's basically arena PvP combat. There's also some PvE modes, but what we're seeing right now is some PvE action. PvP action rather. Wow, I can, you know, do letters and numbers and things. I'm so good at those, as is well known by all of the people. This was actually, I have been wanting to buy this for a while. I don't normally buy these kind of games when they're at this kind of early access stage. I mean, there's been a couple of exceptions. Minecraft and Kerbal Space Program both technically fall into that, but again, I bought them when I was really quite sure that these were fully playable games for what I was buying at that stage, and I think that's basically true with Naval Action as well. This is only a part of what they eventually want to do. I mean, you think of games like Elite and Star Citizen, where they've kind of rolled out bits at a time. It's probably more comparable to Star Citizen, where you can go in and fly in some combat missions and there's not much else to do at the moment. That's basically a good analogy for this, is that you can do basically a couple of arena game modes at the moment, but eventually there's going to be a whole lot more to it. But like I said, I think for the price there's a decent amount there. But the thing is, I have been in my usual having to be careful of spending money state, so I was hanging on to wait till I had some spare money to plonk down on this, and I happened to mention it on the stream one day that I was interested, and RamJB happened to be watching, and he happened to have a code to give me because he's been working with the developers Game Labs, and yeah, so here we are. Now this is actually the second ship that you get. You start off with a tiny wee little, like it's a dinghy with a couple of cannons strapped on the side. It's called a Lynx. This is the second ship, which is the cutter, and you get a couple more cannons. It's still fairly small, as you can see, in comparison to some of the other ships that are in this battle. In fact, we had one of the biggest ships in the game that's in this battle, the biggest ship in fact, up ahead there. External 5 is in Santissima de Trinidad or something like that, but big ass Spanish ship, 4 gun decks and something like 120 cannons, something like that. There were very few 4-deckers built, and that is one of them. The rest, I don't know them by sight yet, but there's a couple of Bellonas. I think there was a Constitution in here somewhere, possibly a Tricomali, but frigates of various shapes and sizes. I think mostly first and second rates, but the surprise, that might be a third rate. I'm not sure, but all ships of the line, basically. And here am I in my tiny little cutter. I actually have now unlocked the next one up, which is a brig, and the one after that is a snow, which is a kind of brig. But I've actually been reading up a bit about the ship types and classes after having, you know, the kind of... yeah, no, that's the ship coming up behind you. You probably should dodge out the way there. But it was mostly the... it was to do with the kind of rigging that was used, basically. And you can see there, most of these ships have got square set rigs. What is even the technical term? I can't even remember. I've been looking it up and I still can't remember. But you basically have fore and aft rigging, which is what this little ship has. And then you have square rigging, which is what most of the frigates have. And then you've had various ships which have kind of like hybrids between the two. And most of those were commercial vessels. I don't know that any were particularly used as warships, but I don't know. There were advantages and disadvantages to both types of rigging. And I will also say, I mean, this is going to be a long video, so I'm going to talk a little about other things as well. But I have some actual sailing experience, because there are a couple of boats locally, a couple of boat societies even locally. I mean, we're on an island, so obviously there's some interest in sailing. There are various people that own their own yachts and boats and whatever. But there are a couple of historical boats, because one of the northernmost villages on the island, Ness, actually has its own specific style of fishing boat that is associated with it, and they're called, I'm probably going to mangle this, but it's one of the few Gallic words I do know. They're called Skol Nishoch, and they are, I'm trying to remember the exact technical classification, but they're clinker-built dipping lug sails. And dipping lug sails are not particularly common as a design, and these ones, I can't remember what it is about them that makes them specifically different, but they are different enough that they are recognised as a separate category, and there are actually a couple still floating around. Now, there's a couple of them that are like historical survivors, ones that were preserved, basically. The main one is called the Jubilee, and that was launched, built and launched in 1935, and it's basically been, it was in use for a little while, but it's been preserved ever since, and it was one of the last ones built, basically. And it was sort of 3/4 size ones compared to some of the larger pattern boats. But in the mid-90s, there was actually a volunteer-led project funded by, God, I don't even know where they got the funding from. I should probably know this because I've sailed on it. But basically, to build a new one of these Skol Nishoch, and it's called the Ansula, and it's fairly big actually. And it's quite fun to sail, but maybe not as fun as the more wee boats because it's harder work to sail. So I have a little bit of knowledge, mostly when I go out on these sailing expeditions with a bunch of people I know. I do things to do either with being on the tack, which is like there's a hook on the front of the boat when you're tacking. The sail has to swap sides basically, because when you're in a dipping lug sail and you want to tack, or even I can't remember the specifics of jibing because that's the other manoeuvre that you can make. But tacking specifically, the whole mast, not the mast, the yard has to come down, and it has to be passed around the mast. And it's a bit of an intensive operation with the Ansula because it's a much bigger mast. But with some of the smaller boats, Jubilee is not too bad. And then there's two small ones called Broad Bay and Blue Bell, and you can basically almost put the yard round one-handed. So they're fun little boats to sail around in. And I haven't actually been sailing recently. Not much happens over winter, but I have a little knowledge of sailing and some of the manoeuvres of sailing and what the wind does and how, you know, things do what they do and why things do what they do in terms of sailing. But that said, it still helped me an awful lot to go and look up some tutorial videos, specifically RamJB's tutorial videos, because he's done a couple on the various manoeuvrings involved. Now, this is what's going on screen right now, because I've basically ignored that up to now, but this is a PvP battle. Now, there's two classes of PvP. There's PvP Light, which is limited up to, I think, snows and downwards. So anything from a yacht to a snow. A yacht is actually, if you are getting into the game now, you get the yacht as a bonus vessel, basically. It's just a little... I don't know if it's quite the size of a cutter. It's probably more the size of the Lynx, but it's, you know... It's got a bit of bling, it's got a bit of a nice paint job going on, and it's fairly fast and nippy. But you can be in one of those battles and get your training wheels, as it were. There's a couple of PvE battles, as I mentioned, and one of those is a PvE Light. But this is full PvP, so anyone can join in any class of ship, from the smallest to the biggest. And I was advised to give it a go by Ram, because you can... Basically, you can assist your team, like it's almost like being a light tank in World of Tanks, except not really, because the bigger ships are actually faster than you, because more sail means better speed. You can pick up more wind with more sail, basically. So, I don't know if you really see it so much in this video, but there was a later one where a later battle I had where I was basically being chased down by a much bigger frigate, and yeah, I'm surrounded by enemy ships right now, by the way. This is all pretty much enemies around me. It was a bit of a... Yeah, I mean, you start off generally with sort of lines of battle forming up, and you're trying to turn and take advantage of the wind and deny the other team the advantage of the wind, but at some point usually it just turns into a giant furball, and this happened quite early in this battle, and I'm just floating around in the middle of this, desperately trying to stay alive, but also trying to keep my cannons going, because at the moment the way you progress to the later ships, the further on ships, the higher up ships, is you do damage basically. So all the damage counts in terms of progressing to the next vessel. And like I said, this was the one that got me the next vessel up the brig. So I've got double shot loaded, and there's a couple of different kinds of shot. You've got your regular ball shot, you've got double shot, which is basically 2 cannonballs, which, okay, does double the damage, but it's got half the range. So it's good for short range stuff like this. Like, I'm practically down these people's throats. And there's also, let's see, chain shot, which is for damaging sails and also potentially demasting people. And there's also grape shot, which is, it's like buckshot basically. It's meant for killing enemy crew. And there are times and places to use all of these, but most often you're going to be using ball or double. So I'm just trying to stay aware of everything that's going on around me here. And that is, I think, the biggest thing about this game, and Ram was saying this, and I can kind of, yeah, I can see his point of view entirely, is that it's not at all about reflexes. Even something like World of Tanks, where you could hardly call World of Tanks like a twitch shooter, you know, it's not Call of Duty or Battlefield or anything like that by any means. But even so, there is an element of that, especially some classes of vehicle in World of Tanks, you know, the fast mediums and the fast light tanks. You need good reaction times, basically, to get the most out of those. But in this, it's all about the situational awareness, about what's going on around you. It's about positioning yourself. It's about taking a very tactical view of what's going on around you, what your targets are going to be and how you're going to maneuver to get to them. And staying with your teammates is also quite important. And at the moment, it's a relatively small number of players online at any one time. I think the most I've seen is about 200 maybe. So you do see the same names over and over again. Some people are pretty good at it, and they've actually, I'm sure there are people, and I'm sure Ram's done this, that have gone and looked up actual naval tactics from the era, which probably does help. I'm still at the stage of getting to grips with sailing around and working on my aiming, working on my shot into the bows there, just trying to stay alive. And at the moment it's fine because I'm with the kind of level of ships where that's what you want to be concentrating on. It's when you get to the bigger ships that you then, that's a victory I think, by the way. You have to start then thinking more about the tactical side of things. It's not just supporting the bigger ships that are doing the things that they're doing. It'll be that you are the bigger ships and that you need to be leading the fight, as it were. So it's almost, in that way, it's kind of like the different tank classes of all the tanks. Now I've got to be careful of this guy because he's going to think absolutely nothing of just running me over casually. I have seen that. Somebody just utterly, like, you can just get rolled over, literally, by a bigger ship who will probably be really not much the worse for wear for it. I don't know if he's deliberately trying to go for me or if it's just he doesn't care that I'm in his way, but it's absolutely up to me to get out of the way. And even with friendly ships, that's true. It's, if you are in a smaller, more manoeuvrable ship, generally the onus is on you to get out of their way. And this is absolutely true when you're actually sailing around as well. If we are out sailing in Stornoway Harbour or whatever, and the ferry is coming in, well, that's several hundred tons of metal that isn't going to get out of the way for us, so we've got to get out of the way for it. So just getting some more shots into the Red Hen over there. Now that, I think it's a victory, but it might be a... I'm not really good at identifying the actual ships yet. Some of them, very helpfully, it says on the stern, because obviously the actual ships, it said on the stern what the ship was called. And in terms of the actual battle mechanics, it's basically the matchmaker just divvies up the ships and tries to make it even, although it does derp sometimes. But it puts 2 teams of 2, and you're floating around even, with either a French flag or, as you can see there, a white ensign. So what ship you're in really doesn't determine which team you get put on, if you see what I mean. There's no like British ships versus French ships, because there aren't that many ships at the moment, but there are enough. I think there are enough to make for quite an interesting, quite a good variety of gameplay. Maybe it is a Santa's. It might be. I'm not paying attention enough to when I'm hitting tab and bringing up the team list on screen to remember which ship was which in this. It's got, I don't know, it might be, But yeah, so I'm just doing what I can to assist the team. I'm just harassing at the moment, and that's, as far as I understand it, that's kind of what you want to do when you're in a little ship. And so the theory goes, the bigger ships are busy pummeling at each other, and in a smaller ship, a brig or a snow or a cutter or whatever, you're trying to harass the bigger ships and maybe, you know, get some shots into sterns. Although you have to be wary of their chasers, of course, because most of the, I think all of the frigate size and up, heck, even the brig have a couple of stern chasers, cannons that stick out the back, basically, and some of them have got 4 guns as well, so they can shoot you coming and going, literally. But you also want to be maybe engaging the other small ships that are on the enemy team, because generally if there are small ships on your team, there are small ships on the enemy team as well. So there's a couple of different, you can see down at the bottom there, you've got your ammo choices, and you can set ammo for either your port or starboard guns, and presumably once you get, I don't know if once you get to being a multi-decked ship, if you can then set ammo for the different decks as well. It might just be port and starboard at the moment, I'm not sure. You also get your front and back ammo. Obviously that isn't relevant to the cutter, but on the brig you get a pair of carronades at the back. And actually, I should mention, there's different types of cannon as well. You can customise your ship layout a bit at the moment. You can have, say, 6-pounders on one side and long 6-pounders on the other side. I think there's a couple of different types of cannon. There's 4-pounders, 6-pounders, and then there's kind of long versions of both, which have a longer range but a longer reload. And then you've got carronades, which are, they fire much bigger balls. I think in World of Tanks terms you'd almost think of them as being like howitzers, but they have quite a short range. So they're good for shotgunning people, but you've got to get in quite close to effectively use the carronades. So on the left hand side you've got the ammo choices, on the right hand side you've got the repairs, and every ship gets 3 repairs. I've used all mine already. I've taken some shots, and if you don't be careful then you can go under quite easily. You know, one broadside from one of these big ships against one of these little ships can utterly wreck you, unsurprisingly. And you also have 3 different kind of sailing modes almost. So you've got 6, well, it's bound to 6 on the keyboard. 6 is an emphasis on sailing, so you'll do things like turn better, I guess. I think the crew's more responsive when you're making manual turns as well. There's gunnery, and I'm going to guess the main thing that affects is your cannon reload speed, and then the survival mode, at which point they concentrate more on keeping your ship afloat. And I'm not quite sure if you have to use repairs and survival at the same time, but if you look down in the bottom left hand corner, that's your wind indicator, that's your ship indicator. It also tells you what your boom yard arm is doing, basically. And as you can see, I've only got 1 to worry about, so I'm staying on the full auto skipper, as it's called. But that also, if that circle starts to fill up with blue, that's you taking on water, at which point you have to start being worried. Now, minor leaks, if you're on survival mode, your crew can cope with minor leaks. It's not a problem. But once you get to more serious levels of flooding, well, at that point you're just staving off the inevitable even, basically. So this has been pretty bruising so far. The tactics seem to be that you focus the biggest, baddest ship. So it's kind of like there's positives to actually being a little ship in that you are less likely to get focused. Sometimes people will basically waste a broadside on you anyway, and that can actually totally bite them in the ass, because they might have wasted a broadside on you and then one of your frigates comes alongside and broadsides them, and they can't do anything about it because they're still reloading. So it's really annoying when it happens to you in a light ship, but it's actually usually a pretty bad play by the enemy player. Now, of course, there are exceptions. If you go floating around, let's say you've got two enemies, let's say you've got an enemy who's got on their port side one of your friendlies, and you come sailing along their starboard side when they have no other targets. Well, obviously their concentration is mostly going to be on what's on their port side because it's a bigger threat, but if there's nothing else to shoot at on their starboard side, then they might as well shoot at you. So you're almost having to be careful about not making yourself the only target as well, because if you do that, you can't really complain about getting focused when they don't have anything else to shoot at. But sometimes it does happen that they do have bigger, more important targets to shoot at, and they shoot at you anyway. And when you're in a little ship and you've got no repairs left, and then you just, like, all of your armor disappears, that's not particularly fun. Especially, it doesn't happen every time, but it does happen. Now this is a frigate coming up astern of me. I'm trying to maneuver to get a shot, maybe. I'm not quite sure what I was doing here, but I decided I'm going to fire at this enemy brig instead. And you can actually hit spacebar to fire a ranging shot. And it just, like, spacebar fires one cannon, and that's how you get a ranging shot, basically. Is you fire one cannon and bam. I was still at the stage, like, dropping sails is useful sometimes, and it can, like, if you're trying to get round to a target, you don't necessarily want to be ploughing full speed. But I was also, to begin with, I was dropping sails under the impression that it helped me turn faster. And maybe it does help you turn faster in some of the smaller ships, but with the bigger ships, actually, once you are doing manual yardarm control, you actually want to have full sail, because it's still all about the wind, even if you're trying to tack through the wind, basically. But I won't try and explain it here, because A, it's not really, you won't be able to see what I'm trying to talk about, and B, RamJB has done a really excellent video on actually the point of doing manual yardarm control. So for the little ships, it doesn't matter, and it's actually quite a nice progression that for the little ships it doesn't matter, and then you get to the brig, where for the first time you've got it's like the main mast and the mizzen mast or something. You can control both yardarms basically, and then you get to the three masters and things like that. So that's somebody going down, by the way. You can see top right hand corner, that's the enemy health indicator, and generally if they've got no hull points left, they're going down, because you're taking leaks at that point. I should probably explain about that, actually. I mean, you might have... Jingles explained a bit about it, and you might have seen some of Ram's videos, and even Behemoth has gotten into this. He's done a video so far. But basically have a health bar for each, I want to say quadrant of the ship, really, because your port and starboard side, but also your bow and stern, also both have health bars. And if they go down to 0, at that point, that's really bad. But also where you take the damage also matters, because if you get a lot of shots in the side, that's going to take off your armor basically. But if you get shot below the waterline, not only is that taking off your armor, but at that point you are taking on water as well. So that's also bad. And you can use repairs if you've still got repairs to actually take care of that. But you have to be careful, and it is possible to specifically target somebody's waterline. So we seem to be concentrating fire on this guy over here. Is that a Bologna? I'm not sure. Concentrating fire. I mean, it's almost like team battles in World of Tanks, where you've got somebody calling out, you know, go for this target, and everybody fires at that target. That's... oh no, wait, that's a friendly one. I think I was just looking at the damage. Concentrating the big nasty ships is usually the first order of the day, and the big nasty ships have got all of the guns, and they've got better armor and all that kind of thing, but it's also the inverse of that, is that you become, you know, a much higher priority target, especially if you're in the Santissima. You are, you know, target number one, enemy number one. Everyone goes for you first because you're the big bad monster. You're the raid boss. You have to be slayed in order to basically win the battle. Because even if all the enemy ships, all the ships on a team die, but they've still got a Santissima floating around, potentially that team could still win. So yeah, there's a lot of that kind of thing in it as well. It's not just maneuvering and tactics and trying to have the advantage of the wind and deny the enemies the advantage of the wind. It's also focusing the right targets and having the tactical awareness, and paying attention to what people are saying in the chat as well. So yeah, there's a whole raft of everything in this, and I've actually been able to play with Ram in a couple of battles, and I think I was on his side once or twice, and I was on opposite team from him in another one. At the moment there's no kind of like friend platooning. There's no kind of yeah, that's a ship coming in on the left side, by the way. That's a ship coming in. It's a Constitution, or is it a Constitution? I don't know, but anyway, that's calculated, all calculated. Yep, that was entirely meant to do that. Knew that was going to. Yep. I forgot what I was saying now. That was an awfully close call. Yeah, I've totally lost the thread of, you know, because I almost got run over by a friendly. This is what I mean when you have to say, when I was saying that as a little ship, you really have to be aware of what the bigger ships do, because even a friendly ship will quite casually accidentally smush you, and the chances are that it's your fault. You have to be careful. So I think at this point we were just mopping up. This was the last couple of enemy ships. They actually had a brig or something on their team that had basically disconnected at the start of battle. Basically, you know, quit back to garage essentially. And it's annoying when it's one of your bigger ships that do that. I've had that happen in 1 or 2 battles where it's been either our team or the enemy team has been suddenly seriously disadvantaged. In fact, I had a battle today where that happened, and one of our was it a Constitution or a Trichomely or something, basically went, oh, screw this matchmaking, immediately quit the battle, and at that point any chance we might have had of winning was lost just because we were then so severely outgunned. So that was a bit annoying. But yeah, this guy in the whatever that is, that might be a Constitution actually. He's basically on his last legs. He is probably shipping water. As you can see, he's making very little way, and his armour is basically all gone. So that's it. He's actually, the moment the sails furl up like that, that's you dead. That's a sign that an enemy's dead, that they've taken too much water on. So I was just having a peek around at this point. I think there was one actually in battle enemy ship left, and then there was that disconnected brig. So I actually, somebody was suggesting in the chat, there we go, Nuclear Moose, which is an awesome name by the way. Nuclear Moose was the guy that nearly ran me over, in fact. He was suggesting somebody go after the brig, so I thought, okay, I'll turn around and do that, and everyone else was chasing after this last guy. And you'd think, being a small ship and setting off first and getting a head start, you'd think I would get there before anyone else, but you're going to see that's just not true. And that is exactly what I was saying about bigger ships equals more sails equals able to catch more wind equals going faster. So yeah, you can also see why if you are able to demast somebody, it's a particularly effective tactic for I mean, you're not taking their guns out of the fight entirely, but you are tying them down quite badly, and if you totally demast them, then that's definitely, like, the battle can just pass them by, and they're basically stuck in one position. And you can, if you do that to an enemy top rank ship, then at that point you are free to continue floating around, mopping up the rest of their ships, and then go and feast on that guy at your leisure, and there's not a whole lot they can do about it. But there we go, that's that brig that was actually AFK, so I'm setting course for him. I'm actually going to fast forward the video in not too distant future, because it cut out about 5 minutes of just sailing towards this guy. And like I said, I start out first, everyone else is chasing the last live enemy, the last actually in battle enemy. So I thought I'd have a decent chance to farm a bit more damage off this guy, but that's not going to be true. As you can see, Nuclear Moose has managed to get there. In fact, Apollo has also managed to get there as well. Also in a... Is that a... I don't even... That might be a Trichomole, actually. I'm not sure. But he stated his intention to ram this last guy. So I was actually desperately turning at this point. Because as you can see, that Trichomole is right in the way. But no, we've got a clear view just in time. And we're going to see the action. And I think that we were hoping for something glorious. Because when I saw... The first time I saw ramming, it was like somebody literally got run over. And they just immediately, almost immediately, just got pushed under and sank without trace. And it didn't quite happen that way. But the brig that got rammed took such a large amount of damage. And of course, there was no human to frantically initiate repairs or go for survival mode, but it just starts shipping so much water that it starts to go glug 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 very rapidly indeed. So that was that battle over. And it's actually fortunate that this is the one I recorded, because I hadn't realised I was recording at full 1080p, which meant that the actual file was rather large. That, by the way, is actually the most amount of damage I ever did in a cutter. It's probably still the most amount of damage I've ever done in a battle yet, although I think I've just about touched 3k damage once or twice. But yeah, it's just a fun game for what you get right now, and you always have to take these things with a pinch of salt. I mean, they're actually hoping to get on Steam, and I don't know if it's going to be Steam Greenlight or Early Access or whatever, but they're at the stage where they're selling the game even before that stage. And they actually had some trouble with PayPal, because they decided to go down the route of you pay via PayPal, the game developer, and they then send you the code that you can then activate on Steam. But PayPal decided that they were being suspicious or something, and there have been cases in the past. I think there was actually a famous thing a couple of years ago with one of the Mojang developers that basically they held on to a lot of money and could potentially have sunk Minecraft. It was quite a big thing at the time. I can't remember all the details, but as it was, that didn't happen. And as it is, you can now go and buy, order this game once again, because they sorted out the differences with PayPal after much toing and throwing and backing and forthing and sending them all kinds of documents and things. From what I understand, they did eventually get PayPal to go, oh, all right, you can have your money. So I would give it a cautious recommendation. I think there is enough there right now that if you think this looks interesting, it might actually be worth it. And I am actually really I'm seriously getting into this. I mean, I really am. There are a lot of games where sometimes I'll do a video for the channel, and after I've done a video, it's like, well, I lose interest because it's suddenly like I'm not doing it for a purpose, but I'm actually having fun just playing this to just play it. And that's a pretty good sign as far as I'm concerned for how I'm gonna, if I'm going to keep out a game long term. And I can definitely guarantee you this is not going to be the last Naval Action video. It's not going to be even the kind of game like War Thunder and Napoleonic Wars, you know, the Mountain Blade thing, where I occasionally dip into it, or something like TF2 where it's really occasional, but it's fun for an occasional, you know, whatever. But this, I think I might actually be playing this a fair bit. We'll see, because I'm actually really enjoying it. So yeah, that's my personal recommendation. But bear in mind, this is not a particularly arcadey game. If you're coming to this from something like World of Tanks or even War Thunder, there is some homework involved. It really does help to know a bit about actual sailing with wind and how sails work and how you do various maneuvers and how you use the manual yardarm control to perform various maneuvers. So there's some homework, but the homework really pays off, and it's fun. It just is. So yeah, I have high hopes for this game. Hopefully they won't be they won't mess up what there is now. They have plans to make it a much bigger game eventually, in much the same way that Guns of Icarus Online, you can go and do essentially just PvP, and then they have eventual plans to do bigger things. But even if that never comes to pass, it's a fun game for what it is right now. So yeah, I give it a cautious recommendation, definitely. So enough waffling. If you enjoyed this video, you can leave any comments below, you can hit the like button, you can subscribe to my channel, and as always, stay tuned for more.